we can now have the next presentation by Mr. Ehab Abdul Hamid Hendawi Abdul Salam, and in that he is a GIS and remote sensing expert at the National Authority for Remote Sensing and Space Science,
Professor Raj,
Egypt.
Dr. Ihab isn't here and he's not online with us. Can we proceed to Dr. Rania?
He's not
Is he
here.
not there? Is
Oh,
he not there?
then we can move. We can move on, Raj. He's not
Okay.
present.
Okay, I hope the host would advise me about who is present and who is not. So maybe then we can go to the next presentation. Dr. Rania Gamal. Dr. Rania Gamal is a research fellow in irrigation and water management at ICARDA. She is working there since 2019. She is engineer, team member, irrigation and water management, and is working on-farm irrigation engineering and in-field measurement of ET for RSET testing. So Rania, floor is yours to speak on, again, interesting subject, identification and quantification of actual evapotranspiration using integrated satellite data for sustainable water management in dry areas, to follow what Professor Farooq Al-Baj had mentioned before. That will be quite interesting. So please, Rania, go ahead.
Hello, مساء الخير.
10 minutes and
Okay.
2 minutes to conclude here.
Okay. As per Dr. Elbaz mentioned and emphasized the importance of using satellite image for water management and for assessing the groundwater for Egypt, here is some related work which have been already using integrated satellite data for identification and the quantification of actual evapotranspiration. We used integrated satellite data for sustainable water management. هي قالت بتقلب منين؟ As we all know, Egypt is one of the arid MENA countries that need to strategically plan and analyze its water resource management. And also we have to assess surface and groundwater resources depletion and recharge rate. We have to implement and develop an effective conservation practice to ensure the alignment with the goals of setting the best utilization of each drop of water. Here is water accounting as an effective mean of water management. So we have water accounting help us to know how much water is utilizing, how much water is allocating, how much water is available in the main certain area. Also, it consider a tool to assess policymakers in making informed decision on linking water availability and use, allocating water resources, investing in water infrastructure, improving water use efficiency, and understanding the impact of water management on user. Here we have, as we show in the figure, surface water, which divided to agriculture sector, industrial sector, domestic sector, fisheries, and so on. To be specific, we have to talk about agriculture sector, which is the light on the evapotranspiration, as the evapotranspiration is the critical for effective water management and water accounting. Here is a chart of hydrological or conceptual model as showing in the diagram show where is water enters and leaves the study area, and also shows the water movement inside the study area, which emphasize the importance of measuring the actual evapotranspiration, which is in red. We have our case study in Bani Suef in SETS station. We have installed an energy balance flux tower for providing us real-time crop actual evapotranspiration of different crops and vegetation surface for irrigation water management. And we used the data to validate the accuracy of spatially distributed satellite developed model based evapotranspiration, and this have been validated, as we said, against the energy balance flux tower measurements. This is the installation of the energy balance station in raised bed wheat production field in Middle Egypt. We calibrated all the sensors in Helioscientific. It's a company here from the Campbell Scientific, USA. And the height of the station was adjusted as we show here, 3 meters above the soil. The sowing date was 25 November. We used the season 2020 and the 2021 for wheat. For the result, we have a daily actual evapotranspiration, which was 375 millimeter during the winter season, and we compared this result with remote sensing based ET, and our model we built it through integration of MODIS and Sentinel-2. And this new model based on two main parts. The first part is the thermal condition factors, and the second part is vegetation condition fraction. The thermal condition factor reflects the high land surface temperature in desert region and urban and bare soil, while it reflects lower land surface temperature in water streams and cultivated area. And the second portion indicates vegetation condition, vegetation density, phenological stage, if it's healthy or not healthy. So this is the equation we have used to build our model. For the validation with to validate or to develop this model versus the in situ data, we have the accumulated remote sensing, which was 418 millimeter, while the in situ measurement showing results 375, which indicates the reference between them was only 43 millimeter per season, which was acceptable as a primary daily data. And the correlation between both the station, the in situ station, and the model was R square was about 0.62. We used this model to calculating the total water consumption in the area of Bani Suef governorate. So we use the land use and land surface temperature map to interpret the water consumption in the study. We have classified the governorate into 5 classes, which is, as we see, water, urban and bare soil, trees and horticulture crops, wheat and other crops. To calculate and measure, we can see, as we see the green line between the urban and bare soil, we have been calculated the accumulated and the total consumption used for Bani Suef as the first step to calculate water accounting in this area. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you very much for giving your presentation in a short period, which is very much appreciated, and it confirms to many of the earlier statements in terms of importance of having satellite imageries for monitoring water scarcity and its impact on agriculture. Thank you, Rania Gamal.
Thank you.
We wish you all the best in your future
Thank
research
you.
at ICARDA. The last presentation now we have is by Professor Usmana Ahmed Ali Al Behari and my dear friend Professor Ayman Abu Hadid. I think Professor Ayman doesn't need any introduction. He is one of the important organizers with Adil Beltaji, but I would like to introduce Professor Usama Ahmed, who is the Dean of Arid Land Agriculture, Graduate Studies and Research Institute called ALARI, and member of 17 national and international projects for greenhouses, soilless culture, green roofs, and climate change, and member of 4 national and international societies. In fact, I would be failing in my duty if I don't say that how much contribution Professor Abu Hadid has made to agricultural development in Egypt. He had been the Minister of Agriculture. That's when I visited and also reviewed one of the ICADA program in Egypt for its continuation. Also, we had been very closely associated through Professor Adil Beltaji. Professor Abu Hadid is currently Emeritus Professor at the Arid Lands Agriculture Studies and Research Institute, Ain Shams University, Cairo, where this webinar is being organized. And he is so active. I'm very pleased to see him. Maybe, I don't know, Professor Usama will be presenting the paper?
Yes.
Or the floor is to you, Professor Usama.
Thanks, Professor Baroda. Good afternoon for everyone. Our talk today is a simple roof garden techniques for combating global warming in Egypt. As we know, the enormous use of ground for various purposes had led to disappear the green area and turn the city to a cement garden. Decrease of green areas have been combined with increased pollution resources to compete that the only thing is the plant. But we can't cultivate the cities because the green area is disappeared. The only way is to cultivate on these buildings, as we see. The roof gardens, as a definition, is a stable living ecosystem that make the urban environment more livable, efficient, and sustainable. Also, green roof is a roof of a building that is partially or completely covered with vegetation. The type of green roofs, the intensive roof gardens, which you can walk on it, and it is very expensive, and it's not, it can be not available for the Egyptian. The other way is the extensive roof garden. You cultivate, but you can't walk on this roof. And as we know, in Egypt, we need the roof for other things. The local type, which is call it a simple or semi-intensive roof gardens, which is designed here in Egypt. On the other hand, the global warming, as we know, refer to an average increase in the Earth's temperature, which in turn causes a change in climate. A warmer Earth may lead to a change in rainfall patterns, a rise in sea level, and a wide range of impacts on plants, wildlife, and humans. The worldwide countries have recognized that the urgent need to reduce greenhouse gases emissions, including such as water vapor, carbon dioxide, ozone, methane, and nitrous oxide. The levels of these gases in the atmosphere are increasing at an unpredicted speed. CO2 emission account for over 60% of the increased greenhouse gases emissions. With the current rates of emission continuing, the CO2 levels in the atmosphere will double or even triple from their pre-industrial level before the end of 21st century. The result of this increase of greenhouse gases emissions is the warming of the Earth's surface and lower atmosphere. It's known as the enhanced greenhouse effect, gases effect. Computer simulation model predicted that the enhanced greenhouse effect will increase the Earth's average temperature by 1.5 centigrade to 5.8 by the year 2100. But what is the relation between the green roof and the global warming? We can say the role of roof gardens for reducing global warming will be in three ways. Distributing additional biomass in the cities, temperature regulation, and the urban heat island effect. The third one, reducing the gas house emissions. For the first one, distributing additional biomass in the cities, we all know that the plants, the only way is taking CO2 and produce oxygen and also give biomass through photosynthesis. 1.5 square meter of uncut grass on a building roof produce enough oxygen for one human being. Secondly, the temperature regulation and the urban heat island effect. The heat island effect is in the middle of the cities, the temperature is higher than the surrounding area of the cities. Decrease temperature by increasing number of roof gardens instead of standard roof materials. As we see, we have two buildings. One, no cultivation, the other cultivation. On the traditional roof, we find that we have the heat from the sun, the building colored by a gray area, which is the cement, is collect the heat. Some of this is going to the building and the other reflected to the air, to the city. If we put green areas, the plants absorb about 80% of the heat coming from the sun. And the other 20% is coming from, we are irrigating the plants and in the media, and there is evaporation, and this is at least 10 to 15% discard of this heat. Also, the smog is coming as a result of heat island effect. And we see here that the temperature in the middle of the city and the air or smog is coming to up and then return back again to the city, and we call it Sahaba Soda. Roof gardens have been proven to reduce heating and cooling cost by 25% and 50% respectively for the floor directly below the roof. Decrease the use of air conditions. Roof garden reduce high temperature, reduce smog. It's clear that the roof gardens reduce the negative effect of urban heat island effect. The third, reduce gas emissions. 1 square meter of uncut grass on the roof can remove about 200 grams of airborne particles from the air every year. If the building or cultivating increase, the air particles is reduced. Ground ozone is formed when nitrous oxide react with volatile organic compounds in condition of high temperature. The ground ozone plus airborne particles is producing smog. Green roof reduce temperature in the city, reduce the use of air conditioned, and reduce nitrous oxide. For that, the green roof can reduce air particles. The green roof reduce temperature, reducing smugs. Other benefits of roof gardens. Sound isolation, substrate trained to block lower frequencies while plant blocks higher frequency. 12 centimeter layers of substrate can reduce sound by 40 decibel. Also, which is the people is worrying, is the building, is the age of the building will reduced as we cultivate? No, it is doubled because we are using soil sculpture. Health benefit, the contact with plants reduce the stress of urban living dates back to ancient cities like Cairo. Also decreased heart rate and quicker stress recovery time. Some of samples is done in Egypt, especially in Cairo. We can see the plants on the roof. This is all different type. You can use it on the roof, especially in the new places. It's very simple. Our message of our plants, help, I can't take much more of this. Please cultivate my service. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Usama Ahmed. I appreciate, I think, again, very important area of work which is required in the context of climate change. And I do agree with you that in urban areas now we need to go for what we call as urban agriculture or peri-urban agriculture, also for vertical agriculture, protected cultivation, and roof gardening, which you have highlighted, indicating its positive impacts. Now, I would be guided by Professor Beltaji whether there is any time left for any discussion, because now we are going to complete on time, it seems.
I think Professor Lal is going to start at 16, which is, we have an ample time. I think there was a couple of questions. Dr. Mohsen Shukri, he wanted to raise a point for the previous speakers through you, or he addressed it to you now, and he wanted to speak if possible. But we have time, Raj, we have. We can take about half an hour.
So, well, we may possibly take about 10 minutes for discussion and maybe 5 minutes for closing remarks.
Okay, fine.
And then give some what we call is health break to the participants before they come to Professor Ratanlal's session. I see him already joined.
Thank you.
So, any comment, please?
Yeah, Dr. Mohsen Shukri, and then His Excellency Professor Abu Hadid.
Okay.
Mike.
You kindly monitor Professor Adil.
Mike. يبقى الحجارة خاصة مش شغال.
I would like to, coming back to the presentation of my colleague, Dr. Abu Naga, because I have a small comment, or not comment, it is additional for our strategy for combating impact of climatic change on livestock. And my point, it is maybe supported the discussion with the chairman and Dr. Beltaji about the improving local breeds in Egypt or in any country, any countries. There are two comments for supporting this point. Firstly, I think that it is very important to have in our concentration the improving of local breed in Egypt, especially water buffaloes, and small ruminants. Because in Egypt, I think that, and my colleague maybe think that, water buffaloes, it is the first local or native breed for dairy milk production in Egypt. And we need to improving the phenotypes for milk production. Secondly, I think that there are, and secondly, it is more related sheep between first one, because in Egypt, we think that it is very important to have a concentration to milk production more than meat or beef, red meat, beef or meat production. And at this point, it is very important for mitigations the methane emissions, because as we know, methane emission from milk production less than the methane emissions from meat production. I think that it is about 30 from the meat production. Thank you for all.
Yeah, I think it's a statement, but I would like to ask Professor Parola, because he was running the research system in India, and they have a lot of work on buffalo. And therefore, I think cooperation between the two sides is very important. I leave this to Professor Parola, please. You are muted again.
Because I don't want to disturb in between. Sorry. One thing we have understood over the years, and particularly in the arid region, that the importance of buffalo cannot be undermined. It is the lifeline for landless farmers and also for smallholder farmers. People facing drought frequently in the region would have not survived had there not been buffaloes. This is what is my personal experience coming from rural village in the desert of Rajasthan. Buffalo number has increased over the years. The cattle number has remained stagnant, around 200 million in India, but buffalo has now gone beyond 100 million in number. And as I showed in my presentation, there are very hardy breeds which can tolerate, rather they are called, the animals who love the heat, and they can give you milk even with very less feed requirement, and they are already adapted to the climates which are ranging anywhere between 45 to 48 degrees Celsius in different states. So I would like to say that it was actually in the past, the buffalo trade was there from India up to Azerbaijan and also up to Egypt, and also to that extent to Italy. Only Italy and Azerbaijan have capitalized on the wealth that they got through trade through Silk Route on buffalo, but maybe others used them for meat purpose and didn't find them useful. Possibly there is need for some cooperation. India is very, that way open. Recently there were buffalo breeds given of the best buffalo to also Vietnam. we can establish some cooperation. But I would say that since the climatic conditions and also the agriculture in the Nile Valley represents quite alike to that of Punjab in India, where buffalo is the choicest breed of every household. Only thing is they need to be taken care of. We need to have good germ plan, and we have to understand their utility. So that is what I would like to say here.
I think there is time. Who wants to speak? Dr. Adla Banega, please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. The only thing which I recommend that we will have one of the
Closer.
one of the recommendation of this webinar is that we should give attention or importance to the local breeds, especially buffalo and small ruminant. It's just like that, in a very brief thing and in a very direct thing. I hope it will be included in the conclusions of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make a small comment?
Please.
I just wanted to add to what you mentioned about buffalo. I recently visited Mato Grosso in Brazil.
Oh, this is Professor Lal?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, good.
So in Mato Grosso, I was very surprised. The Haryana breed of cow and the Mura buffalo are very, very important. And I saw a farm with 80,000 Haryana cows. Very big, their own meat processing, primarily for meat processing. But also Mura buffalo is now in Florida. So it's a highly adaptable, and what I understand is that if it's harvested about 1 year younger, they cannot differentiate between its meat and the beef. So buffalo is getting very popular in the West.
Yeah, and buffalo is actually good for meat, and India is now emerging as a major buffalo meat exporter for the last 2 decades.
Yes, Dr. Suleiman, you had a question, Evelyn?
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Paruda. First of all, for the introduction you made when you mentioned my name, which I don't deserve all these good words. My question to you is related to the old book of Feeding a Billion that was published last year. And by this time, India was self-sufficient from wheat. And nowadays, I think we are running in a greater problem worldwide, and especially also in India. My question is, in your opinion, do you have any idea, is there any possibility that this miracle happen again?
Yeah, I think we need to reorient our agricultural research agenda to make those areas which were bypassed by grain revolution, especially the dryland areas. And that's what we had discussed earlier, and also presentation of Himanshu Pathak clearly reflected that, and I myself also emphasized that globally conservation agriculture has been practiced in more than 205 million hectare area by now. But the drylands of Sivanas and CSE region, it was started in Kazakhstan to some extent when I was there, and also in India. The conservation agriculture in dryland has not yet picked up, whereas there is definite need now to scale this innovation. But this innovation would require very careful approach to take it to the farmers in a mission mode and with commitment by the policymakers and also with proper extension, with relatively longer extension lead time, because here farmer would want to know what is the benefit. Like by growing the dwarf wheat, he would immediately see the increase in yield. But if we are telling him conservation agriculture, increasing organic matter content, which Professor Lal would probably address, then it will take maybe few years to understand the impact of it on soil health. Or if it is any, biofertilizer, then biofertilizer yield increase would not be immediately in the same season, but maybe in the next season to the next crop. So we require a longer lead time, we require better extension. We also know that every farmer will not be able to buy equipment. And for conservation agriculture, for smallholders, you would require mechanization. And for that, you would require, again, custom hire service centers, support by the government, maybe involvement of the private sector. You will have to privatize the extension. You have to provide input to the farmers, and you have to bring youth and involve them as entrepreneurs, as input supplier, as extension agents. Then I think we will be succeeding. Otherwise, conservation agriculture is not going to pick up. But this is a win-win. If we don't do it now, I think we will be losing. And this is the right time that we emphasize on this to scale it urgently. Because in NRM, the natural resource management, what else you have? And we need now, COVID has clearly told us that we have to conserve natural resources. And even Green Revolution technology has told us not to overexploit our resources. So we have, and on varietal side, we are doing quite well. There are many excitements in all countries. Genome editing will provide further opportunities for increasing productivity. But we need to bring in efficiency on input use so that farmer is not able to spend more and is able to get linked to the market and able to promote sustainable intensification in agriculture.
Thank you. Raj, I have a suggestion because we have time. Professor Lal, his session will start at 4 o'clock. And now, 4 o'clock Cairo time. And now we are about 2:14. I think we are just touching some very important topics. And if there is one question only from the floor here, and then we can continue in a panel forum. I would like just to introduce some of the wonderful colleagues who are now on the screen. Professor Jim Falk, our dear Professor Mohan Saxena, who is the power behind the International Dry Land Development Commission, as well as His Excellency Professor Dueri. We can discuss a lot of things. And Izumi from Totori University from Japan, we can stir up a couple of things in about, we can take between, I think we can have about 15 minutes if Dr. Seliman will ask the question very quickly and have a quick answer, because this will be good for the audience to see this panel discussion. Please.
I'm taking the advantage here by having Dr. Farouk still with us over there. Sabah al-Khair for Boston. Salah Seliman, Iskandariya. Well, my comment actually
You are not
is,
loud.
I don't want to be very optimistic about the groundwater in our area in North Africa and in the Arab Peninsula. Because I think several years ago, one of the great poetry, Omar al-Khayyam, said إن تنزع القطرة من بحرها ففي مداه منتهى أمرها. Meaning, if you take a drop from the sea, it will go on and on and on, but it will end up in the sea. So I'm not sure that we have too much water underground that we can depend on. 25 years ago, I met with Sheikh Sulaiman al-Rakhi in Saudi Arabia, and the complaint was about the groundwater in Saudi Arabia. In the beginning, when they dig for the groundwater, it was about 60 to 80 meters underground, but it ends up with 1,300 meters down there. And you come up with water that is full with rust, with sulfur dioxides and heat. So you have to just keep it for a week
Okay, Dr.
to come ready.
I think your question is clear. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Farouk, you would like to comment on this?
Yes, and particularly in the case of Saudi
And then
Arabia.
we go back to Arabia. Please.
Indeed, because especially in the case of Saudi Arabia, where over-pumping of the groundwater was the case. They over-pumped water in way beyond the ability of the aquifer to sustain itself. And what needs to be done is to figure out the area where you're pumping water from and figuring out what is the proper rate of pumping that water, which is being done right now at the East Oinat in Egypt, so that they figure out what is possible to pump that does not affect the resource. So in Saudi Arabia, they just let it be, and so many people, private owners of the land, over pumped everywhere, and now they have a problem there. So actually, if the government knows how to deal with the pumping of the water, to figure out what is the proper rate of pumping, and then apply that by law, and then therefore you can preserve that rate. So in Saudi Arabia, it was a different case because they just let it be for all the people that live in the central part of the Arabian Peninsula to pump, private owners of the land to pump as much water as they wanted to do, and it was a stupid thing to do, and now they are suffering from it.
I think Dr. Elbaz is talking about very important facts, because what Saudi Arabia has done, and I've been flying several times over this, going to Pakistan, going to Afghanistan. I traveled over this area, and you can see, rather than a pivot ring, you can see a glittering ice, which is all salt, because the whole rings of the pivots became salty, because the misuse of the management, which Dr. Baz is advising, that you have to understand what is the shape of your aquifer and how you can pump from it safely, and it's a matter of management. But okay, some people think that underground water, you leave it for the next generation. You don't have to use it now. But anyhow, thank you. It's great to have this discussion. But Raj, with your permission, we are now in a panel form, and let us move it. Let me introduce first to you all Professor Jim Falk. Jim Falk is the chair of the International Advisory, the RACC, which is a Regional Action for Climate Change. We are working on this now. This meeting here, or this meeting, which will be in Kyoto, will be the 14th. Then for 14 years, we were working on this group to find a link, to find where is the gaps, to try to optimize the synergy. But let me give him the floor. Jim, you're welcome. It's good that you are with us today, rather than sending emails every half an hour. Welcome. I thought that you are sleepy by now. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'm tremendously pleased to be experiencing this webinar and the extraordinary range of papers, very constructive papers, dealing with the vital issues of agriculture and arid lands, and particularly the countries where the webinar is located in many ways. It's quite interesting, really, that we have in Australia, which is where I am, also some very large arid lands. And the issue of use of aquifers and the use of surface water is very much one not just of management but of governance, because there are contesting forces. There is a history of private ownership of the major river systems, and our major river now barely reaches the sea and is in considerable danger, quite a long way up, in becoming a dead ecosystem. And the government has made attempts to buy back the water, but because of government's work within political constraints, it hasn't been a success. And every now and then, a successive government will let more water go into agriculture and destroy the river itself. At the same time, underground water is being drained out of the greater than recharge rate, and so we're getting salination of previously agricultural soil. So everywhere, I think, we are seeing climate change in the context of what one might call Anthropocene practices, Anthropocene practices, creating critical issues for agriculture. And this particular webinar, I'm hoping that we will see a statement drawn out of it, highlighting key points.
For sure. For sure,
which
Jim.
can then be fed into the subsequent symposium in Kyoto,
Yeah.
which will also lead then to a statement. And the Kyoto process will focus significantly on, as its name implies, on regional action. So it's a question also of what the communities can do, not just the science, but how does the right information, the information the communities need, how to get there, and how do they identify what they need? This has been a preoccupation of RACC during its existence. And we are now also seeing, as we expressed in a paper, in a letter to Nature and a paper in Sustainability Science, that there are converging trajectories of risk. So it's not just climate change, but the destruction of biodiversity, but also, as we're seeing, global tensions disrupting food chains, and an emerging food crisis in Africa in particular, but in many places. So we want to understand how you can monitor converging risks, how you can model them, how you can monitor them, how you can predict their impacts, especially in the regions that have to adapt to them. And we add that to the issue of how do we draw on the science. So I'll be very interested if the expertise here, at any point wishes to focus at all on those issues.
It's good to hear a comment from you on this. Welcome, but you are not in Wagga Wagga, you are in Melbourne.
I'm in Melbourne.
Yes, Wagga Wagga is a little harsh for you. Anyhow, thank you, Jim. Colleagues, we will go back. We had with us His Excellency Professor Joueri. He was not only the former Minister of Agriculture in Jordan, whereby the water per person per year is less than 150 cubic meter of water. World average is about 7,000, the US 17,000. Therefore, Jordan is really the top stressed country worldwide. And he had done a wonderful presentation on genetic resources. But if you would like to have a quick comment on this acute water poverty which we are facing and the way out, I mean, transport of water from Turkey was an issue in one point in time. Is this still in the agenda, or we have moved from this now? Professor Dueri.
Yes, okay. Thank you and good afternoon. Masā al-khair. Thank you very much. Do you hear me now? Okay,
طبعا, loud and clear.
Yes, okay. I think nobody in the world feels the importance of water availability than the Jordanian people. I think, the stresses we are having is affecting every aspect of our life. Agriculture is the most important one. Of course, we are suffering because of the lack of drinking water. There are several measures being taken by the country, by the government. And one of them is drilling the wells and the badia that is in the area, which is suffering also from the water, deep wells. Now the country feels that we have to go, the best way for solving our problem is desalination of water. So the desalination, and we have in about 5-6 years, we are hopeful that we will have the first major desalination water project in the country, which we hope to be sufficient for the water. Of course, the agriculture is suffering, and maybe, as you said in my presentation, I will just indicate some of the measures. We feel, that we have been stressed, as I said, by the water, and we feel that we should be moving from planting wheat to planting barley, other major crops in the Jordan Valley. We have also to abolish some of the crops and emphasize the crops that are they have high market value, either for Jordan or for exporting them to the other countries. But the stress is very high. I would say, one of the major effort is really to save on water, and we feel that there is a waste in the whole process, from digging the wells till the distribution, till the use. Maybe we are taking advantage of the use of the wastewater, for some of our crops in the country. Of course, we have to also try other measures, other crop management measures for this period.
Okay, thank you, Professor Dueri. I think we move now for just one quick comment from the session, which Dr. Raj is still with us. Your assistants. I think the Professor Osama, when he presented this roof garden, we will have in the session, which will be chaired by Professor Lal Rutan, we will have a colleague, Dr. Sameh Odd, who will talk about the heat emission from the buildings. Therefore, this is a very valuable pattern making a roof garden to minimize the damage on the city transmitted to even agriculture and urban areas. This is very important aspects, and I hope it will continue. The work of Rania as well is very interesting, and I hope she will continue on this because this pattern, as you have seen from our colleagues in India, they are working on this. There's a lot of work, but in one point in time, we should put hand in hand with other countries which is similar to us. Because the idea here to have a similar agroecology, and we share the information together worldwide, then we can harness the synergy for the benefit of all. What Jim Folk was talking about community, yes, community live in a locality. Locality, it means a site with particular characterization as far as the environment there. We used to make the famous equation, genetic resources by management, by M, by P, by people, is equal yield. And this is the alphabetical, which the old generation like myself and Raj, and happy birthday, Raj, you now being graduated, and we are coming on the way very close. The issue here is that G by genetic resources, by the environment, by people, equal to yield, still standing up till now. But we have to transfer this to how we can model it, how can we use what is successful under 3 centigrade, with wind velocity, with temperature in the soil and everything, in the canopy as well, canopy and underground, because this is what makes plant growth and development happen. And therefore, we need to listen to what's done in Rajasthan, what's done in similar environment, and continue doing this all the time. I think I have been notified by the learned professor on my right hand that Professor Lal's session is supposed to start now. It's 3 o'clock. And therefore we are just approaching, but we can really have some roundup conclusions. We'll listen to whatever the chair is going to tell us. Professor Paruda, the floor is yours, and then we can have a very small time, and then we come back to the session at 3 o'clock of Professor Lal Rotan. Professor Paruda, the floor is yours.
Oh, well, I must say that it has been a very useful session. We were expecting the information relating to simulation modeling and its use for assessing the impact of climate change. It is very clear that there are models, but they would require ground data for having better prediction. So we have to still keep on refining, but we must use this information in terms of not only our future projections, but in terms of present benefit to the farming community. And in that context, the use of models for the impact due to weather calamities during the seasons for crop insurance to the farmer is one immediate step that could be of great help. It is also necessary that we now try to adopt a twin pillar approach, which I had also indicated, and not only the genetic enhancement, but also the natural resource management, and in the process ensure that benefit is to the end user. We have to also understand the prioritization for our future work relating to scaling of innovations, also relating to impact that is likely to be there in terms of national initiatives, because we just can't all the time expect the developed nations to help us. The charity begins at home, and we need to take action. We need to decide what we can do. Every country has already national commitment made towards Paris Agreement. Whether we are approaching to achieve those in given time till 2030, we have to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and in that respect, a lot of initiatives that are there need to be assessed at the national level. We have to have a strategy for One Health concept, which was highlighted by Professor Atallah, and recent conference of the UN on food systems clearly highlighted the importance of regenerative agriculture. And regenerative agriculture is a broader aspect which is needed, whether it is water conservation, soil conservation, also relating to having better practices for reducing the emissions and carbon sequestration. So all these would be required. It would also require adaptation strategy, which came out very clearly. And adaptation is possibly the first soft approach that we need to highlight. But we need not forget the hard approach of mitigation, because ultimately mitigation would help us. And for mitigation, what is causing from agriculture, which is about 30% to greenhouse gases, is the land degradation. So how can we recheck, and what are our land laws? How can they be improved? Also relating to the forest, whether we can cover more forest, and if not forest, which at least in India we can't cover, then maybe we have to go for agroforestry. And agroforestry is a win-win situation and is a much better option. And conservation agriculture for covering larger area to see that we have more carbon sequestration is another way which would require out-of-box thinking. We need to have mission mode programs. Many presentations, in fact, highlighted most of these issues which I am indicating, and we need to keep into consideration the scenario of temperature rise. And I mean, we are really worried and afraid of 4-degree projection, which is likely to be a real disaster. But even if we try to make effort and contain it to 2 degrees Celsius, then which means we are adding another 1 degree Celsius in this century. And for that, are we prepared, and what is our strategy, and do we have possibilities to cope with such temperature rise or rise in the seawater or the droughts? And for that, we definitely must have local, strategy at national level. And maybe through this conference, we come out with some very critical few recommendations, which even Ratanlal also yesterday highlighted, that even agriculture in COP26 was not highlighted. So soil was not highlighted. Conservation agriculture or sustainable intensification was not highlighted. So how can we then improve? It is not only industry, but agriculture also, which is going to be important, area to be addressed to solve the problem. And therefore, this aspect must come up front. Like agriculture must be brought up front in terms of priority, and investment must be increased. Without investment, without institution, without human resource, nothing will be possible. we can keep on talking and talking. But probably now is the time to catalyze policymakers and make sure that something happens. And there are many initiatives at the national level, but in India, at least I can say, there is lack of coordination. Everyone wants the empire building process. So lack of interministerial coordination, lack of interdepartmental coordination, inter-institutional cooperation, and then convergence among these activities. So effective monitoring and system at the national level for climate change is also an important requirement. I think time is running out, Adil. I was not prepared for this, but you took me by surprise. I thought now I will listen to session which is being chaired by Ratan Lal, and there is an interesting presentation by my again good friend Professor Dwivedi, which I would like to hear, because what Jordan is doing, I think, should be an example before all of us. If Jordan can survive, I think we all will survive.
Thank you. This is the wisdom. We need to have hope that we are all going to survive. I never surprised you. I are always ready, Raj. But anyhow, colleagues, I think I would like to thank Raj for his wonderful leadership in chairing this session, and we'll expect a lot of things from him later before we close.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like just to ask Dr. Mohan Saxena if he will say a couple of words, because we have still time until we go to Dr. Lal. Dr. Mohan Saxena is a dynamo behind the International Dry Land Development Commission. He has been pushing it for years, and he's editor of different volumes of the outcome of the international meetings which happened in the past. Dr. Mohan Saxena, where are you?
Yeah.
Oh, he is in Boston. In Boston, where Dr. Baz is. Please.
He is awake all night.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, ya Mohan. Allah ya'tik al-afiyah, Mohan.
It's good to hear all these words of wisdom from various speakers. I'm really very happy that the webinar has been progressing in such a good manner. I don't really have very many comments. So many things have been coming out. But I think as Raj was trying to summarize things in the session that occurred today, and in fact I had to get up very early in the night to partly attend this because of the time difference. So I might be a little bit sleepy at this particular point of time. But nevertheless, the fact remains that one has got to be emphasizing on the improvement of genetic makeup by application of the biotechnological tools that have been elaborated. Both these topics have come up very nicely today. Raj himself emphasized the importance of genetic resources and also hinted on the opportunities that are available from the technologies that have been developed. But I think we have got to put them into operation in such a way that they are really going to make impact on the farmer's field. Raj indicated as to how the BT cotton could be yet promoted, but there is hurdle in terms of genetically manipulated other crops. And I think it's important that emphasis should be now made in terms of realizing on the part of the governments of the concerned countries that those technologies should be made effective in terms of letting be implemented and genetic resources developed, improved, so that the farmers really become capable of utilizing some of these opportunities that offer. I think there's tremendous amount of scope for improving drought tolerance, heat tolerance, for improving tolerance to the newer emerging pests and diseases. All these things are possible, but that's only possible when we are able to apply all the knowledge that's already becoming available. CRISPR's scope was shown, other omics application was talked about, but I think application that can directly affect farmers has yet got to come, and partly it is because of the policies that the governments have been using. I think there's a need for a collective effort in terms of emphasizing with the governments that these potential scientific tools that are providing opportunities for development of new crop varieties that could fit into different agricultural systems have got to be supported. We've seen the example of Dr. Izumi's presentation in terms of identifying what will happen in terms of changes in the temperature with respect to the simple wheat production in Sudan. Again, that paper very clearly concludes that there's a possibility of utilizing the presently heat-tolerant varieties to bring about continuation of production goals, but with suitable adjustments. Same way we have seen as to how the conservation agriculture would bring about improvement in the resources that are available, but for conservation agriculture to become successful also, once again, genetic manipulation and holistic approach for incorporation of these new materials into the cropping system will become necessary. All these points are coming out very, very nicely, and I hope it all augurs well. And I think it is important that we should try to emphasize with the governments that these potential tools that are available, that application should be made possible by removing restrictions that prevent the widespread use of the outcomes of these tools. Thank you. This is all that I'd like to say at this particular moment. I look forward to further presentations that are going to come up from Dr. Taveri and other colleagues who are going to talk in Dr. Rathanlal's session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohan, inshallah. I think in addition to the wonderful element you said, I would like the word which Raj has said concerning coordination between entities, universities, countries, local people, unions, farmers, private sector. This coordination is lacking, and the translation, and therefore it does not help if there is resolution in COP 23 until now we are heading for 27. All this resolution, if there is no goodwill to coordinate from the level of people, from the awareness of people, people makes what comes out on the ground at the end of the day. And therefore we need more coordination, more cooperation. And the motto of my country is only, it will survive alone. In this planet, this is not going to work. And therefore, these politicians, this kind of politicians have to see other ways for them to survive as well. Because people recognize that their time is not long. If they don't cooperate, if they don't live with the existing problems, with others, putting hand to harness the synergy. Having said this, really, I would like Dr. Fatima Osman as member of the local organizing committee, and she wanted to say something. Dr. Fatima, are you around?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to ask Dr. Elbaz on, I was working in the JEF on the Nubian sandstone aquifer back at the time, and Dr. Assas was helping me in doing a research on it. So I'm not aware of what happens ever since 20 years ago on the question of the Nubian sandstone aquifer. I was just wanted to ask whether there's a potential of using such sandstone aquifer, and which is, you know, it's, of course, everybody knows it's spanning 4 countries. And so what is the reason of not exploiting this as a groundwater source in this very near future of water scarcity crisis in our region? I don't know if, in other words, what might be the technical, financial, or even maybe geopolitical reasons of impeding any efforts in exploiting this. I know that at the time, or maybe right now, even Libya is using it as a part of its Manlin River project to use it in agricultural purposes.
Thank you very much. I think the Nubian aquifer, as if it is just one layer throughout all of this North African zone, is wrong. The Nubian sandstone in places has a lot of water, in other places it has nothing. So the Nubian aquifer is not one. It is multiple aquifers everywhere, yeah? And therefore it cannot be thought of as one unit. If you pump it here, this will affect otherwise in other places. It is not. And in Libya, even in Libya, the fact that they drill wells and pump water, yes, they drill wells and some pump water, get it, and it goes into the Great Manman River. In many places they drilled and there was absolutely no water coming out. So it really depends on where you drill and what is the shape of the aquifer in that place. Also in Egypt, it's the only place that's good enough is this East Roynat region, the Roynat, where most of the wells reach something. Some of them are only 25 meters, some are 100 meters, but variations only in the depth and the amount of water, but there is water in that whole region. In other places, it is not. If you drill to reach the same level of where the water is, in East Roynat, somewhere else in the desert, you find that. So it is not one layer. It was a Russian expert idea that the Nubian sandstone is one layer coming from Sudan all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, and it has the water and it's at depth, and if you pump it here, it will affect there, and there is no such thing. The Nubian sandstone throughout the desert, in some places has porosity, in some places it does not, in some places it has water, in some other places it does not. So it is not one layer with water at a certain depth and it goes this way. So this we really should change that idea. In the North Africa, there are places that has a lot of water, and places a little bit of water, in some places deeper water, in some places higher. So it really varies on the region. And it's up to you to use the water where it is. For instance, in Sharq al-Aynat, there is plenty of water between 25 and 100 meters. Use it, that's fine. And it is being used. Now, Sharq al-Aynat, it produces half of the grain in Egypt, nearly all of the vegetation that the army eats. The Egyptian army comes from East Aynat, so it's fine. So it's and if the water will run out, yes, fine. But it is viable to use it right now for many tens of years. So it depends on where you are, and we should not think of it as one layer, as one great water in one layer coming from Sudan all the way to the Mediterranean. That is not right.
Okay, so I guess satellite imaging can help in locating different locations within the aquifer that can be exploited.
No, not yet, but we have the instruments, the geophysical instruments and so on. The satellite images will tell you most likely in this place, because there are some dry valleys that lead to this place. If there are 4 river beds that lead into that place, then the water would accumulate there. So it will tell you where water would accumulate. But how far deep and how much of it is something that you have to do with geophysical survey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Baz. And I hope you don't go and sleep. Stay with us for the next session. Colleagues, let me thank Raj for chairing the formal session, and thank you for this sessions we had the chance to interact with other audience, with participants and speakers in other places, and with Jim from Australia and others. And I hope that we can proceed. The next session is very important session because we have to realize that doesn't matter what we do in science. This is hard science, what we call hard science. Doesn't matter what technology we are presenting. What counts in the end is the human being. How we are going to respond. Does he think that this relates to him as a human being? Or he is concerned, he would like to participate, he owns the process? All these questions is going to be raised, because when we talk about coping capacity or adaptive capacity, it's empty without the human being. Therefore, Dr. Osama, what we are talking about is sustainable development, which is based or human-based or people-based sustainable development. It has to be based on people, not based on whims and desires of anybody, doesn't matter how much intelligent he is. And therefore, we need to listen to the sounds which come out with the wisdom of Professor Lal Rutan, who will be chairing this session with his introduction as well, which we will highly appreciate. And therefore, I think this session will start in 3 minutes, and we hope that we can really benefit from it. In Africa, we need this very much. In all the dry areas in the world, we need to see why the decision taken in convention after convention. I think when we were in Kyoto, there was a meeting on, this is the World Water Council. We said, water is human right and water is for everybody. What we ended up with, that no translation of this. We said before in several meetings, food is for everybody. It's the right of every human being to have food. But what happened? We have 900 million now who is in hunger and acute malnutrition. I worked for 9 years with Jacques Diouf. I was in the High Committee for the implementation of the Millennium Goals. We have worked, all the heads of FAO, they used to report and give us an idea about what they are doing in the implementation of the global targets. And what happened? It decreased and then suddenly increased again, because it does not translate. It has to translate to community. It has to be owned by people. People has to work together, and therefore institutions has to correct their course according to the will of the people. And this is what we are hoping for. And let us really work together and see how this next session will be formulated, and the continuation of this session. This session is today, but it will continue tomorrow with Dr. Ismail Swagdeen. We will have some people who have been in the seat of policy maker, heads of states and prime ministers. Tomorrow we'll start with Dr. Jeffrey Sachs. First at 9:30 he will talk, and then after that we will move to the high-level politicians in Europe and in different other places who will give us their experience, why the decision we make in conventions internationally, why it's not translated, why there is a hindrance in this. And meanwhile, they will address other point about the future of this $100 billion, which has gone nowhere. And we don't know, we need to see if this will help, which is just a drop in the ocean to remedy the damage which happened to developing countries from the advanced industrial countries. They will talk about these elements, and therefore, and after that, we will There will be the closing session tomorrow in the afternoon. I think I